Lead with Love is brought to you by Alex and Steph from Dreams Financial. When I was looking for a new financial advisor, I had a checklist in my mind of what that relationship would look like. I knew I wanted someone who didn't just talk at me, but strategized with me. Enter Alex and Steph. They get how important it is that I understand where my money is going and why, and they help me get clarity on how to make it work for me. I trust them with my investments, and you can too. Visit them at dreamsfinancial.ca for more. This is Lead with Love, and I'm your host, Cynthia Iorio. Welcome to Episode 3, Burning Buildings. This is a term that I've coined. It's something that I came up with. And the best way I could explain it to you is by using a quote from Mr. Rogers. So just to date myself a little bit, I was born in the 80s. And so Mr. Rogers was very popular when I was a little kid, and he was a child television star educator, only surpassed by Mr. Dressup, but we won't even talk about that. That's just my opinion. But Mr. Rogers said something on one of his shows to his audience, talking to them about fear and when they get afraid about things that they might see in the news or catastrophes and stuff. And he called on a quote that his mother used to tell him, and she used to say, "Look for the helpers. When you're scared, look for the helpers." And it just makes me think about that scene from This Is Us, where you see the father running back, spoiler alert, into the house, into a burning house, a house that's burning down, to go save his dog. I saved the dog, the family dog. And that house is burning down. And this man's instinct, fight, flight, freeze, was to fight. And he ran right into that burning building. And for so many of us, caregiving and caring for the ones that we love is our burning building. This is the building that, without a doubt, is the one we head on for. And I know that's what it was for me. I had zero question in my mind when I got the diagnosis with my mother that she was terminal. I mean, I was there in the doctor's office with her. And the same thing with my dad when I was at the doctor's office with him and I heard he was terminal. There was no doubt in my mind. The way that I saw it, I'm dropping everything that is completely unimportant, and I am going to be here for them because of love. I love these people so much. This is something that I must do, I want to do, I will be doing. I had no idea when I did take on what I did with both of my parents that caregiving was my burning building. It's only in hindsight, when I think about it, that this was something that I was able to do. I was there in the room when both of my parents were told that they had less than a year to live. At the time when my mom got her diagnosis, I was 34 years old. I was living on my own. I had no kids. I was not married. I was working on my career, and my mom called me to go with her to the doctor's office. They had received the results of some of her tests out of a routine visit because she had been diagnosed with stage 2 cancer back in 2013. And while she was in remission, she was still being followed. And so she asked me to join her. And I said, absolutely, of course. And the appointment was at 3:00 in the afternoon on a Friday afternoon, which should have been a telling sign that something may have been up. And I believe, if my mom were here now, I'd love to talk to her, but I'm pretty sure she knew something was up, which is why she had asked me to go join her at her appointment, because she never really did for any of her previous appointments. She always had her boyfriend there or somebody else, but this time she asked me to be there. We went to the doctor's office. We went to visit her first doctor, which was a urologist, because her cancer was bladder cancer. And the urologist told us that it wasn't good news and that he had set up a follow-up appointment with her oncologist right after this appointment. And so we were going to meet with him. As I was walking out of the room with the urologist, my mother and her boyfriend had walked first and walked ahead. And that's when the urologist pulled me back and he just looked at me and he said, "Cynthia, it's not good. and you have to be there for your mom. And he said it just out of earshot of my mom, so she didn't hear. And I didn't know what to do with that information. And so I kind of kept it in my back pocket and walked out into the waiting room. And my mother was sitting to my right, I'll never forget, and she looked at me and she said, "So, what did he tell you?" "Well, he just told me to be with you, just to be by your side." And she gave me the all-knowing look, like she totally called my BS. But anyways, we were called into the doctor's office, the oncologist's office, about, I would say, half an hour later. And we sat down, and her oncologist was absolutely incredible. He was a very gentleman, kind and sweet, and he grabbed my mother's hands. Or maybe that's just what my memory is telling me. I think maybe that's what my memory is telling me. I kind of felt that the way he handled it was as though he had cradled us in his hands when he said it. But he just looked at my mother and he said, "Unfortunately, your cancer is metastatic." And he said, "Unfortunately, there's now no longer a cure." And I think the air was sucked out of the room immediately. And his words kind of just hung there, and we all just sat there in disbelief. My mother had literally walked 10 kilometers the day before. She didn't look sick. She didn't look like she was unwell. And we were all kind of confused. And the thing that does stand out vividly in my mind, and I know that this is not a recreation of my memory just because it has stuck with me for so long, is the fact that from the neck up, my mother's face was stoic. She was calm. She looked him straight in the eyes. And I just remember from her neck down, her entire body was shaking. It was as though her nervous system had completely kicked in and she couldn't control it. But neck up, she was all business. And in that moment, I was at a time in my life where I was getting ready to settle down in a different cool, trendy part of the city, and I was going to be moving out of downtown. In that moment, I thought about the question that I had asked and spoken with friends about years earlier. If you had the choice to find out when you're going to die, do you want to know or not? And that was the question that I had in my head. And the one thing that I told myself in that moment, and this is where I say I didn't know that caregiving was my burning building, but in that moment, I thought to myself, okay, we know that this is going to be her last year. We have an opportunity to do this right. And I made the decision, in that split second, I'm moving home and I'm going to take care of her, whatever that looks like. And I did. And it was my fight that kicked in. And I just said I wanted to be there with her and for her and beside her. With my dad, it was a little bit different. With my dad, he called me on a Monday and asked me to take him to the hospital because he thought he may have suffered a stroke. We were only seen about 9 hours after we had gotten to the hospital by the first doctor. And so we had the tests done. And over the course of the next 3 days, all of the tests that came back that should have indicated that he had had a stroke came back negative. But he clearly was walking with symptoms that he was wobbling and his right arm was floating. So they ultimately admitted him to the Neurological Institute. A week to the day that we took him to the hospital, I got a call from the doctor saying, "Could you come in? We have some test results. We would like to speak with you." And my spidey senses went up from the time that my mother had called me to go into the hospital and had some results. So I just dropped everything and went, sat in the hospital room with my dad, where the doctors told us that one of three things was going on and that the likelihood of the most severe and the worst thing going on was a disease called Creutzfeldt-Jakob disease, which is an offshoot of mad cow. I was stunned. And my father sat there and took the information as though he were hearing about the weather. And it was fascinating to me that I was in this exact same position again, and that I had a family member who, in that moment, was stoic and didn't fall apart. And I also had the same thought that I had with my mom. Okay, we're doing this. And so his life expectancy was 3 to 4 months, but ultimately he passed within 4 weeks. And so ultimately, this just became my burning building. Like, we're doing this. And in hindsight, everything I went through for both of my parents was not something I could have predicted. I didn't expect any of it. It challenged me to my core. It all nearly broke me. And it probably did break me. It did break me. Everything I went through broke me. But I've been able to take so many lessons and rebuild a better me because of it. Let's not make a mistake about this. Caregiving is intense. And it makes a lot of sense to me why people will either freeze or they will flee. When you think about the things that are on a person's plate when they are caring for a loved one, it can be absolutely terrifying. Just listening to Terrence Ho, who you also heard from in the previous episode, talk about what caregiving actually looks like, both in high moments of caregiving as well as in more calm instances, really highlights this point.
Not only have I caregave and care advocated for my brother and my mom, I've also done it for my grandfather, and then also for a family friend who used to be my brother's support worker, who has no family in country and was diagnosed with dementia. And so I was then her power of attorney. So I would say I've had a lot of different experiences in that. And I think from my experience as a carer and all the skill sets that I learned, it sort of like forced me to learn how to organize and manage my time. And yes, I also worked in some corporations before where I, as like a strategist and like project manager, like I also learned the skill sets in the corporation, but I also felt like a lot of the skills of managing, coordinating care also gave me that skill set and refined my skill set of how to manage my time, and then kind of know when I'm close to burnout. And then to be able to, okay, like I could only have this much on my plate, and then kind of manage my time in that way. Yeah, so there's definitely an ebb and flow, especially when the extreme caregiving happens to when then there's like some downtime. I know then I could fill my plate with the other things that I want to be doing. And then during the extreme caregiving phases, I know I just drop everything because I know I can barely like just sleep and eat. That'd be as much as I can do. Having that awareness of what I'm capable of during the extreme caregiving phases and then the non-caregiving phases, it's just about having self-awareness.
And so talk to me about the difference that, as you see it, based on all the experience you have, of what extreme caregiving is versus what, I guess, a lull is more like.
So I'd say extreme caregiving would be instances where, maybe I'll use like my mom as an example. When she got her diagnosis, at first all of us were just stunned by the news. And then what happened next also was kind of like out of the blue, where she started having like suicidal ideation. And to me, that was a huge concern because we do have a family history related to suicidal ideation and suicide. So then it got a bit more extreme because now it's like next level, where not only was she like thinking about harming herself, but others, she on top of her cancer diagnosis. And then now it's like, okay, so how do we keep her safe?
And so that required you to kind of be hands-on and be more implicated, kind of shed all of the other things that were not necessary and tune into this is what my focus needs to be right now.
Exactly. And that was very hands-on and constant advocacy to be like, okay, this is what's happening, emergency, making sure that she's safe, and then advocating for her as she was then hospitalized for it and kept safe, but then constant advocacy to make sure that any of the treatment for the suicidal ideations and depression was being managed. And then on top of that, also trying to manage her cancer treatment on top of that. So then it's pretty much around the clock talking with the care team. And to me, that I call extreme caregiving, because now we're in emergency alert mode. Things change day to day and on. Like I just have to be on. And then when I'm not on, I crash and sleep. Yeah, so I would say that would be like an example of what an extreme caregiver or caregiving can look like, where because it's an emergency to ensure our loved one is safe, we just got to take care of it.
And what is the lull more? Is it just the maintenance? It's more of, what does that look like?
So maintenance could look like, so for example, for my brother, I would say for the last like 2-3 years, he's been kind of like in maintenance, in the sense that as long as he receives his PSWs on a daily basis to provide the activities of daily living, there is no, say, like emergency. So PSW stands for personal support workers.
Okay.
And in Ontario, we're very lucky that we get government-funded hours, and they come in and they provide any activities daily living. So this could include transfer in and out of bed, meals, and all those type of stuff that we typically do on a daily basis without thinking, where someone like my brother needs like all aspects of activities daily living taken care of by other people. So to me, now my relationship with my brother is mostly around like advocacy if he needed some additional services, and it's not like an emergency. So I would say that's kind of like a lull in my caring.
Less tactical, hands-on, and more kind of step back managerial kind of oversight.
Exactly.
You know, caregivers, and it's evident from our conversation, are some of the most resilient and hopeful people that I've ever met. Where do you think that comes from?
I think it comes from love. Part of it comes from the love that we have for our family and our friends that we care for. And I think we hope our loved ones that we're caring for like gets better. We hope that things in general will get better overall. So I think because we've experienced these challenges of like witnessing our loved ones like decline in their health, and maybe sometimes they bounce back, maybe sometimes they don't, but I think it gives us the experience of just like loving deeply, like especially going through the experience of like witnessing our loved ones die and stuff. Like we know that things will get better. So I think it's these experiences of intense like pain and sadness, but it also means that we really like love, and that's why we're able to experience these intense pain and sadness as we're caring for our loved ones. And so I think it's because of this experience that then also translate into all the areas of our life, that we can be resilient in all the areas of our life because we love.
And it's that thing, that fight, flight, or freeze. And for those of you who may not know what that is, it's basically an immediate reaction to a situation that takes you out of your comfort zone. So fight, flight, or freeze is really the body's reaction to being thrust into an immediate situation that is out of the ordinary. And for so many of us, caregiving is that. Now, what I learned, especially in speaking with different people at the Caregiver Summit, but also just in general, is that so many of us who have been caregivers are so changed by the experience, we actually pursue helping other caregivers and actually change the courses of our lives in order to be able to help others. This was no more apparent to me than when both Liv Mendelsohn and Oliver Fitzpatrick, who you heard from in a previous episode, answered my question, why do you think caregivers go into the field of caregiving?
Caring for someone you love so deeply profoundly changes you. You know, when I cared for my grandmother who had Alzheimer's, and caring for my neurodiverse kids who I adore, caring for my mom who had ovarian cancer, and now my dad who's aging, like these are the people who shaped me. These are the people who matter most to me. And I want a better future. I know, my kids are going to be caring for me someday, and I want this to be easier for them. I want this to be easier for people right now. I want this to be better. And I think that's true of so many people. I think it's a very, very life-affirming and life-changing experience when you're caring. And I think for a lot of people, it's also a real wake-up call. And caregivers are doers. Like, we're the ones who step up. So I think there's also that element of it where people who believe that better is possible and that we can be part of that.
I think it comes from how central caregiving becomes to your life when you're a caregiver. You know just how deeply affected people are when they're in this situation. And so there's kind of like a multiplier effect when you start doing the work and helping people in those situations too. Like, you know what a difference you're making, and you're helping people who the main thing they have in common is that they're helpers, right? I really think that it kind of multiplies out, and then you're seeing such a return on it that working in a caregiver space is really motivating, and it's like hard to stop. You just want to keep doing it.
Caring for my parents hasn't always felt heroic, and I've certainly faltered, and I've had my guilt for that, and I've made mistakes, but I did it, and I'm proud of what I've done, and I feel strong about what I've done. I don't know what it is that makes caregivers so strong. I know for me, I was powered by love. That's what I did. And I just felt this unwavering need, or this unwavering devotion to be there for my parents. I think it's the value that we put on life that makes us run towards this burning building. The sanctitude of preserving someone's quality of life is just so important. We just value life. And that's what makes us so strong. If you like what you heard today, be sure to check Lead with Love out on Patreon, where you can subscribe for exclusive access to extended interviews and behind-the-scenes content. Please follow, rate, or subscribe to Lead with Love on the podcast platform of your choosing. We'll see you back here next week.